listening to Director's Digest, the show for directors by directors. I'm your host, Elijah Lotzenizer.
In today's episode, we have a very special guest, Michael Schaubach, director, producer, and executive producer for the streaming service Dropout. He has directed shows like Dimension 20, Breaking News, Total Forgiveness, Actually, and many more. Michael, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Elijah. And hi, everybody out there in the podcast world. I don't know where this is going to go, but you can find it wherever you find podcasts. Maybe, I don't know. This could just be for your class.
Firstly, I just want to know how you got your sort of start in directing.
Well, that's a good question, Elijah. I think that the story begins all the way back in college when I went to university in St. Paul, Minnesota, called University of St. Thomas. And I was going to go into advertising. I wanted to be a copywriter. I thought that was fun. There was money in that game. And so I was like, hey, look, I'm going to go into advertising and I'm going to be creative and also make money. While I was there, my very first job on the campus, I delivered, this is aging me, Elijah. I'm an old man. I'm prefacing this with I'm an old man. My job was to deliver TVs and VCRs to classrooms. They didn't have a multimedia in every classroom. So a professor would order up a TV VCR, and then it would be a list of deliveries for that day, and I would go deliver. The other thing that we got to do was we got to film the presentations that were happening in the brand new auditorium, and they had 2 cameras that were robotic. And so whoever shift it was during the presentations, you got to control the cameras and sort of like kind of make a show. And I really, really got a kick out of that. And my boss at the time, who was a great mentor of mine and a mentor of mine to this day, her name's Pam. And she said, you know, you shouldn't go into advertising. You seem to really like this stuff. You should go and become a television director. And so 2 years later, I didn't tell the school because who knows if she would have been fired, but I transferred out after my sophomore year and I transferred to the University of Iowa because at some point in time when you say something as ridiculous as, I want to be a director, which is not that ridiculous, but I think that there's a stigma to it because everybody wants to direct. I think there's a point in time where the rubber has to meet the road in order to have that dream come true. And for me, the first step in that process was transferring schools to a school that had a film program, which was the University of Iowa. And I finished out school there with the hopes of going into anything in production. It just so happened that I had a good computer and I liked learning new software. And so I sort of became the editor in my friend group. And there's just a lot of storytelling and control that you have in editing. And so that made me very useful in the job market. And I learned machine rooms and I learned soldering and I learned basically everything around production, sound, camera, hung out with DPs. They taught me how to light. And so when you set out to do something extraordinary, like work in the production world, there are times where you kind of lull a little bit because you have a good job, you're making money, you're paying rent, and for me, post-production was a really great avenue, and like people were always looking for somebody to run post. Somebody was always looking for an editor. I did sound design too. I did some graphics. So I was, multifaceted in the aspect of finishing things, which made me really valuable and hireable. In 2008, having done that and worked in lots of different post capacities, machine rooms, tape dubbing, I would do transcribing. I would transcribe for reality shows for HGTV. All that circling around sort of made me a really useful utility player in production, and that's what brought me to CollageHumor in 2008. From that moment on, I was an editor, and then I ran post, and I was able to tell Sam Reich, I'm really interested in directing. Is there anything you can give me? Very graciously would hand me directing projects throughout the time from 2008 to 2016 when I switched over to full time. But it was during that 08 to 16 process that I was able to show Sam that I could handle different types of directing, different genres, different levels of directing. The very first directing gig that he gave me actually gave me to co-direct with the friend who hired me at CollageHumor, David Fischel, who I met at the University of Iowa. He was the editor and had a post there, so I worked underneath him. And we used to do these all-nighters where we'd stay up all night long and we'd make like 12 videos in 12 hours while people were doing their finals. And we really would stay up all night and we would make videos and we'd edit them. It was a real, I cried every time. Without a doubt, and I told them leading up to it, without a doubt, there will be a time at about 3:30 in the morning, I'm just going to have to go to the bathroom stall and I'm just going to cry for like 15 minutes. It was such a stressful thing to do, but it was so fun. I mean, the end product was really great, but I think one of the first all-nighters, Sam offered the opportunity for us to direct together, and we got to direct a sketch with The Whitest Kids You Know, which was a lot of fun. And at that point, they had their television show, so it was really exciting. And my co-director, David, had known a couple of them through the sketch world and through the improv scene in New York, so it was really a friendly, fun experience to work with them. And that was like my first. I'd done some directing before. I directed a pilot with friends, but this was like a thing for a directing for someone else moment, and that kind of just started it. So very committed to post-production, and that's sort of my lesson to people who are thinking of transferring, right? Like I did, and we're getting up to that move now, which is don't be bad at the thing you're hired to do. Be so good at it that they want to see what else you can do. I think that there's sort of like sometimes people get confused and they're like, well, if I'm bad at this, they'll let me do the other thing. And it's like, I've always followed the formula of just be really good at everything that you got hired to do and at least do the job you got hired to do for a year. I mean, this business moves fast, but running post, I had a lot of people come to me early on in my department in the first few months and say, actually, I really want to be a writer, which is fine, but I just spent a month finding somebody to fill this position. I need you to just be committed to this for like at least a year before I start passing your name around, and was happy to do that. And I helped a lot of people elevate and move to different departments. In 2016, positioned open, Sam came to me and said, do you want to direct? And I said, yeah. And so that kind of started the full-time real director in the seat. And at that point in time, I was director editor for the first year of that, and then was able to negotiate to just be director because so much work was coming in. And so that's how I became a director. It really was the seed that was planted in my mind very early on by a great mentor, and then just a continuation of finding work and being a utility player within the sphere of production and working in all facets of production. And then just landing at a really great place that happened to be producing a lot of work that needed directors. And then me forming a relationship with Sam Reich, proving to Sam that I was able to handle all different types of genres and projects in creative ways, in ways that he liked. Now here I am today, 2025, and have been directing now for 8 years. And as you said in the intro, a multitude of different types of things. So it's been a lot of fun. So that's how I became a director. It wasn't I graduated and suddenly was handed something. I really worked for it, and I really had to have my own personal creative journey in regards to it, because I think for a while it felt kind of impossible. It felt kind of like, what makes me so special? Why can I say I want to be a director and then make that happen? So there's a lot of stuff that goes on now. When I mentor students especially, I make them all raise their hand and say, I want to be a director, because this is not a position that they're doing calls for, right? Like they're not, hey, we don't have enough directors, so who wants to be a director and direct it? It's too many people. So in order to make it happen, it's kind of like going to the moon, right? Like you can't be like, I think I kind of want to go to the moon. Like when we wanted to go to the moon, we had to be like, we're going to stop at nothing to go to the moon. And that's how being a director has to be in your own mind. I will stop at nothing to be a director, which can include taking on other jobs, having other lives, and all of those skill sets, everything that you learn in production I had the camera, got a DVX 100A that shot 23:9:8. So it was video that looked like film, Elijah. Can you believe it? And then I had a boom microphone that was gifted to me from one of my jobs, but I didn't have the boom pole, so I just used a Swiffer WetJet handle, and I put the boom pole on that. So I kind of came as like a one-man band for friends who wanted to produce something. Like I could bring sound and I could bring the camera, and then I could take the footage home and I could cut it for you too. So I think you just have to really stop at nothing and love all facets of production, because when I'm directing, I'm also editing. That's how I became a director. Long story long.
So what have been sort of some like standout productions and shows that you've worked on throughout your career, like a favorite one or maybe a least favorite one?
I've been fortunate enough to work on a lot of really amazing projects. There are projects that have done really well. It's hard to decide a favorite. You've asked a very good question. Obviously, the most successful thing that I've done is Dimension 20. It's the thing that's allowed me to do the most cool things. I just did a show at Madison Square Garden, about to do a show at Hollywood Bowl. That's cool. Who would have thought that directing a Dungeons & Dragons show would give me the access and capacity to do large event directing? That's really cool. This business is very much about what lane are you in? And along with genre, drama, comedy, sci-fi, action, there's also scripted versus unscripted director. And I've been very fortunate to be able to say that I direct both. And Dropout has given me the opportunity to direct both. Shows that stand out in my mind, obviously Dimension 20, Total Forgiveness, and Gods of Food. Those three are a really interesting trio because they exercise different parts of my directing brain. And the products of those projects are something that I'm just very, very proud of. I'm proud of everything that I directed, but like how it came out, the emotionalness of Total Forgiveness, being able to walk along with them as they wanted to tell that story, this burden of debt and how the means to paying back that debt and what they were willing to do, being there with them as a caregiver was really special. And that show to me, I mean, just really amazes me, the journey that those two went on for that. And then Gods of Food is like, I remember having a conversation with my director of photography early on, and I said, it has to be funny and it has to look beautiful. And he said, well, which one's more important? I said, they're equally important. And I really feel like that we walked the perfect line of that show. It is, I've seen, in my mind, the prettiest thing on Dropout is Gods of Food. If anybody is interested in seeing something that might be in the vault, go search up Gods of Food. It's the brainchild of Reka Shunker. It's a love letter to cooking shows and documentaries. It was our parody of Chef's Table, which is why it had to be beautiful. I mean, when you're working in parody genre, the closer you can get to the source material, the funnier, the better it's going to be. And then we just had an amazing cast in that one, and we really put it together. We had 18 days on that, and we were all over Los Angeles, shooting in restaurants in the middle of the night, getting 60 shots in a 12-hour day. We were just dialed in on that one. And then Dimension 20 was just so fun because, you know, we started in this little dome on the third floor of an office building in West Hollywood. Rick Perry built this geodesic dome, and we got to go in with the 7 amazing storytellers, and they just started talking to each other, and they just started building a story and playing characters and weaving this wonderful first season that led to, 25 seasons now. To me, the continuation, the longevity of that one is really special. Obviously, all the storytelling, all the stories told, all the IP, all the people that I've gotten to work with over the years, the evolution of the mini shoots that we've been able to do is really special. I'm a nerd, I'm like a dork, Elijah. I'm totally a dork. Before even working on Dungeons and Dragons, I was a dork. And I was a collector. So I collect comics, I collect pins, I collect movie memorabilia, I collect toys. And so it's just really fun to help make a show that then made the things that I like to collect. I have a cabinet filled with pins, plushies, stickers, posters, dice, and it's just wow, I made a show that I would have followed if I hadn't worked on the show. That part was really cool. But then Madison Square Garden and seeing the fruits of our labor over the years, just seeing the results of creating that homey community with that show and being with 20,000 like-minded people who were there to support each other and love each other and watch 7 amazing people tell an amazing story. From this perspective, it really doesn't get any better than this. I'm looking forward to what's in the future, but my God, if it all ends tomorrow, Elijah, and that's my high water mark.
What does your production schedule look like for any sort of given show? Take Dimension 20, for example. What does that look like? Sort of how far in advance are you planning for a show like that?
Yeah, we start, ideation from the very, very top. It could start at any point in time. You could think of an idea in season 3 that we do in season 15. So I think that there's nuggets of ideas that are constantly out there. Pre-production in earnest starts about 3 months before production. It all depends too if we do minis or not. Pre-production not only is important to ideation and world building, because there's a lot there's so much that's improvisation, but that you have to create a playground for the improvisation to thrive. So there's a lot of world building that goes into place. And obviously Rick Perry, if there's battle sets, Rick Perry needs to know what those battles are going to be for the most part. 3 months before we start like a bi-weekly meeting, and we just talk and talk and talk and talk. Like we talk until people have to go to the next meeting. Most of the time that's Brennan, who's just like the busiest man in Hollywood. But we'll take Brennan as long as we can get him. And then we go away and we have things that we have to work on or research, or Rick is just work. I mean, Rick runs his own world. The Rick Perry art team world is like they're their own production. They have their own schedules, their own budget. He manages all that. You can check out the legendary Rick Perry on Dropout if you want a glimpse of the work that he does on the art side of that show. It's just amazing feat that him and his team are able to accomplish. Then as we get closer, we'll start meeting more. Also, I'll be meeting with my producer outside of that meeting. The producer and I are really the ones that like handle the physical production, orchestration of the days, who's the rest of the team, who's the coordinator, who are going to be the key PA. We're going to have an assistant director this season. Are there going to be trailers? Is it that kind of talent? Where's the, we're always sharing the space with other shows that drop out. So it's like, are there other shows? What's the parking going to be like? So there's all these like the nitty gritty of it all leading up to it. So I try to talk to the producer as much as humanly possible, so we're on the same page. When we finally hit show day, we are completely aligned and we have basically a plan. A lot of times what I'll do is when we have new people coming to the Dome, much like the Queens or the wrestlers, people who've never been to our facility before and people who have never played Dungeons and Dragons before, right? So there's a special consideration that has to be done for that talent. So one of the things that I do leading up to the production is I'll bring my entire team that's going to help manage the movement of talent from arrival to through HMU to set, and I will play the part of one of our guests, and I will literally land at the entrance, and then they'll guide me through the whole process. I'll have them greet me. We do a full role play, like we do a full run through, and I wander off sometimes. I try to recreate, people being lost, or I don't know what to do next, or where do I go from here? The key to it all is like hosting the party. So every single minute, new people should know what's going to happen to the next. And then we have our repeat players, the ones that Intrepid Heroes come, they have their own rhythms and they know what's happening. So there's a different things that we have to do for each of those. So that's pre-production. Do you want to move into production?
Yeah, we can go into sort of how the production side looks.
So we work on 12-hour days, and we don't go over. That's a tip for directors. Good to get your vision, but remember there's a budget. And most employers, all employers, depending on, how much capital they have, they're always looking for people who are going to bring projects in at budget. And time is included in that. So, the race for a production day is the clock starts ticking. My speech in regards to the type of directing and the type of atmosphere that I like to develop at any of the shows I do is the atmosphere of kindness, of grace, of giving people the benefit of the doubt and, being safe, both physically and emotionally. So I always tell people, we are not each other's enemy, which is, you'll find that a lot on traditional sets. The departments are like, constantly battling for resources, no matter where you are, but you'll see that in traditional productions, the departments can sometimes be rivals with each other, which is a really interesting dynamic to witness and help manage and, try to alleviate as much as humanly possible. But on set, I have more control, like the sets I do for Dropout. I make sure everybody understands that our common enemy, our common foe is the clock, and that clock starts ticking at call time and stops clicking at wrap. So it's a race. And so we try to we're shooting full 12. We try to get 2 episodes of Dimension 20 done and 2 episodes of Adventuring Party. At the very least, we got to get a whole episode of Dimension 20 done before lunch. We can do Adventuring Party, episode of Dimension 20, and Adventuring Party after lunch. We've done that before, but ideally we do 2 and 2 either side of lunch. That time moves very quickly. And it's that getting in the morning through HMU orchestration is the biggest challenge, and getting them through so that everybody looks and feels good, getting them to the table. And if Brennan needs to, Brennan's a genius that walks the earth. If anybody's listening to this and they're like, what are you talking about? Check out Dropout, check out Dimension 20, research Brennan Lee Mulligan, and you'll see a genius that walks among us. So everything sort of depends on the player's knowledge of the show and knowledge of the game system. The less they know, the more time they need before we actually start rolling. So we've done things leading up to that, like a session 0. We'll get the cast together on Zoom and we'll all talk about the characters and I'll introduce myself. I always say, there's 1,000 things I need to tell you before we roll the cameras. I'm not going to tell you all 1,000 at the same time. I slowly step through the 1,000 things that a performer needs to understand about the show. Because ostensibly it's like, oh, well, I'm just sitting in a chair and I'm just talking to my friends. But it's so complex for a performer. And so as a director, you really have to be careful about the amount of information that you're giving over at any particular time. And it's a lot of repetition. And then after a couple of episodes, they start to get it. Like, oh, I get it. I understand the orchestration and how all of this works. But if it's a cast that plays and is known them like the Intrepid Heroes, then we really kind of just get to the table and get at it. So it's about HMU wardrobe. And once everybody's in their looks, we just do a wardrobe change after lunch before the next episode, but we can pretty much get going faster on the second episode. The day goes by like a blink. And I always tell people, for you aspiring directors out there who might be listening to this, lunchtime is your safe haven. So use it wisely. Busier directors, I've had times where I've had meetings over lunch, which is just devastating, but you sometimes have to do it because you're getting ready for the next thing. Or there's discussions on things that you have to do for the current season that you're on. But if you can take lunch for yourself, that's really important. I always tell people you can tell the type of day that you're having. If lunchtime, you're happily eating and maybe chit-chatting with some people, then that's a pretty good day. If you're in your car crying, then that's a bad day. So lunchtime is 30 beautiful minutes for you to do whatever it is you want to do. You can continue hosting if you want to do that, or you can steal away and preserve your creative coffers and reset and rebuild. But yeah, that lunchtime, come hell or high water, comes right smack dab in the middle of the day. From lunchtime on, you have 6.5 hours to finish your day. You're looking at that clock, you're hearing that clock. That clock is just an ever-present foe in your life. And you have to have the ability to maintain the person that you want to be in this world, regardless of the amount of stress that is being put on you. That's your responsibility as a leader on set. That's what I believe. In order for us to change this industry, to eviscerate the toxicity, we have to start with ourselves and the person that we're projecting out to other people. Can we let the stress get to us? Sure. Is it easier to be agitated and to yell at people and not be kind? Maybe. But I think it's better, and I think you get a better product when you step outside yourself and you say, you know what, I'm going to be a better version of myself. And then rap comes along, and you maybe have a meeting about the next day, or you get in your car and you drive home, and it's either, I always tell people, it's either I'm putting on my favorite music and I'm bebopping all the way home, or it's complete silence. And neither of those really indicate whether it's a good shoot or not. It's just how busy is my brain. If I'm needing to enact my brain and get my brain going on the next thing, or I'm really thinking deeply about something, it's no music. It's just a silent car ride home. And my brain is just, and that is it over and over and over again. For all the people that are interested in getting into production and whatever it is you want to do, most college graduates will go out into the industry. If you want to get into physical production, you will become a PA. Do not underestimate a 12-hour day. It is the great equalizer. It will find you out. If you do not have your life together, if you do not have it together, multiple 12-hour days in a row will find you out. So make sure that you know how to get good sleep. Make sure that you participate in activities that preserve your energy. There is truly nothing like a 12-hour day, unless it's a 14-hour day, 16, 18. We don't do that at Dropout. We stick to 12, but production companies with bigger budgets and have the ability to cross-board and they crunch the numbers, you could be looking at all kinds of hours of days, which of course is good for money, but not good for your mental health. So the bare minimum is the 12-hour day, and it is. Either you are built for it and you can handle it, or you cannot. And if you cannot, there's plenty of other work to be done in the office with regular office hours, and there's also post-production. If you come out to LA and you go to Atlanta or New Orleans or Canada and you want to be a day player and PA or key PA, or you want to grip, give it a shot, but no, that's not the end-all be-all, and maybe set just isn't the right place for you. And that's okay. I have friends who are just like, they're absolutely brilliant, and set is just not for them, and that is okay. There's plenty of other jobs. But as the director, you don't not only have to do the 12-hour day, you have to be the model citizen. People For a while I had, you can't see it. I'm going to describe my hair. I have a hairdo that I do. You can go online and you can see it. Most of the pictures you can see my hairdo. It's this big sort of wavy bouffant thing. I have a little stripe of gray. And when I first started to do my hair this way, I had a great hairstylist. He said, I'm going to grow the top out a little bit, but just know that when you're not going to do your hair, it's going to be wild. So it's either hat on, didn't do my hair, or hat off, and my hair is all done up. And early on when I started to do my hair that way, I only had, by the way, this is all part of directing. I know we just started to talk about hair products, but it's all part of directing, and here's why. People are going to look to you for the level of success and stress on the set. And so in the beginning, I'd only use a paste on my hair. And so by the ninth hour, my hair was wild. It was like matted down or spiked in a way, and it just looked frazzled. And so people would come up to me and be like, are you okay? So that to me taught me like, okay, I need to get, and also if you look online and look at me, you'll see I have the most ridiculous curly mustache. It's like an old-timey handlebar mustache, which I do for my kids. My kids love it. They think it's hilarious. I keep it around. And I found a way to sort of freeze my hair in place, and I have a really thick mustache wax called Death Grip. And so what I try to do is just make it so that I don't change for 12 hours. So when people look at me, they're like, oh, it's good. We're all good here. We're all good. Even if I'm not frazzled and I just happen to throw my fingers in my hair, they'd be like, oh, is everything okay? So just know that people are looking to you as the flagship of sanity. So keep that in mind to work on that projected ego, right? The projected ego that we're all working on, which is our ability to look at ourselves in social situations. So work on that aspect of your directing, and every now and then go check yourself out in the mirror and be like, do I look like a trustworthy person right now? Do I look like a leader? Do I look like somebody who would follow me into war right now? If you don't, if you look a little frazzled or untrustworthy, it might be time to think about your look. We can get into post too if you want. I mean, that was just into production. Then post goes on forever. I mean, a big season of Dimension 20, a 20-episode season could take a whole year. Never After, we delivered the final episode the week to the year of our first meeting for Never After. So there's 3-hour episodes. They just take a long time to edit, and they go through 3 or 4 rounds, and then they have to get sound designed, and they have to get motion graphics, and then they have to get prep for production, delivery to the Dropout player, and all this stuff. The whole thing just takes a long 20 episodes, pretty darn close to a year it takes to do a whole 20 episodes of Dimension 20. You're just in it for a long time. And I'm way ahead on things. I'm 2 seasons ahead right now of what is actually playing, things that haven't even been shot. So your brain is constantly in the now and constantly in the future, and it's constantly in the past. That's where you have to kind of live as a director. You're like a time traveler. You just like jump from one thing to another.
You mentioned that you did show in Madison Square Garden. How was that sort of experience directing something more in the live sort of show type compared to how you typically would do Dimension 20?
So I did not direct the Madison Square Garden show as co-executive producer. This is getting into the nitty-gritty of, which is fine, Elijah. We're getting into the nitty-gritty of titles and roles and what it is that people do in what scenarios and where. So I had never had live-to-tape directing that. Directors that call cameras, like sports shows, the Oscars, the Emmys, Saturday Night Live, right? These are directors that say, okay, ready, camera two, okay, cue up that, these kinds of things. I didn't have that experience. When we shoot Dimension 20, we just record all the camera angles, and I'm watching for story and adjusting audio. And, there's lots of things that I'm busy doing, but I'm not switching cameras. We don't do live-to-tape directing on that. So I simply didn't have it on my resume, and it was too big of a show to hand me the helm of that. So they hired an amazing live-to-tape director, comedy live-to-tape director named Sanford Restrepo, who was absolutely amazing. And I was the co-executive producer. But I did build that show. So I built that show. And what I mean by when I built that show is that I took care of all of the visual aspects and the oral aspects, all the sound that you hear, the music, the intro, outro, the intermission stuff, everything that you heard in that show, the flow of that show, the run of that show. That was all developed by me. And then Sandy came in like a few days before, and I sat down with Sandy, and I ran the show for her and all the executives at Live Nation. I basically did this presentation, did a whole pre-visualization. So this is where it's different than the actual show. you get one shot. So you have to rehearse before the show. And the way that you rehearse a big show like that, since Madison Square Garden is literally every single day something's different. So like the hockey game cleared out for us at 2 a.m, and then our trucks moved things in at 3 a.m. And then when we stepped off that stage at 11, the union guys were already unloading the trucks because the next day they had college basketball. So we went to a company, the production company that helped us put that show on, had a big facility in New Jersey. So for the week leading up to that show, myself, Carlos Luna, Rick Perry, Brendan Mulligan came by for a day, and then their whole production team, and then SJ helped put on the European shows and also did the lighting for MSG. We all went into this big warehouse and they had these big screens up, and then we had all the computers that we were going to take into the show, and I loaded all the assets on, and then we just ran through the show. And it was a really interesting experience because not only did I get a good experience on putting on a big live show, but also it taught me that like I knew a lot of it already, even without the practice of it. And our show doesn't really fit within the traditional show of any of these live shows. It is a combination of like rock show, stand-up comedy, live theater. It's like a combination of everything. So I realized that one of the big jobs that I had as co-executive producer, basically sort of the creative mind behind the show, was I had to teach people what it is they were seeing and what it is we were doing. Literally, like technicians were coming in to help us put on the show that were going to hit the button. And I had to be like, this is TTRPG. This is a role-playing game. Have you heard of Dungeons and Dragons? Literally, me in a warehouse in New Jersey, sitting down with these people who have done like the Oscars. Have you heard of Dungeons and Dragons? Kind of, yeah. I think my kid's into it. Starting from there, because you have to start with the foundation of the gameplay in order for them to understand why a normal run of show for a live, aside from a sporting event, which it has its moments, like they know when they're going to commercial, that there's things that are in a schedule for a live show, even sport, that are just there and will always be there and cannot move. And especially shows like the Oscars, like a lot of times even the camera calls are it's all scripted, or music concerts have the music. So you'll see live to tape directors and their foot's tapping and they're going cut to 3 and 4 and cut to 4. And they're doing it on music, and it's things that have been decided. For us, my run of show that I made, it had, here's when we start the show up here. So it had like 3 things that were absolutely going to happen at the beginning of the show. And then there were like 3 or 4 things at the bottom of the run of show that were like timed out because talent had to be out by 11 o'clock or they're going to charge us another hour. And then there was this whole blank thing in the middle, Elijah. And so I had all of these experienced, genius live to tape, live show. These people put on the biggest shows you could possibly imagine. And I'm showing them a run of show where the whole middle section does not have a single timestamp on it. And I was explaining to them, okay, at any given moment, one of 15 things can happen. And this is what we're going to do when any one of those 15 things are going to happen. How do you know what's coming? Well, I've been making the show for a while, so I can kind of anticipate, but we have to be ready to hit any one of these 15 things at any given moment. And for them, it was just like, wow, like this, it was just blew their minds that it was this kind of putting on a show. So as I tell people, I just went back to the University of Iowa and did a directing workshop. And they said, what's the big difference between directing Dimension 20 in the Dome and co-EPing or being a part of the show at Madison Square Garden? And I said, when I'm directing at the Dome, I'm very still, unless I'm jumping up and handling problems, and there's always problems going on, but I'm just kind of, my feet are not moving. I'm just typing or I'm making my shot list for the minis. I said, when I'm doing a show at Madison Square Garden, my feet were tired. Like I was doing like a dance with my feet for 3 hours. My feet were just like double tapping on the ground, like because the amount of stress and the frequency at which I was listening, right? Like I was listening so attentively. He's going to do a roll here. This is, a lot of people think like he had a button for the fire. For people who don't know, there was a fire element, but they wanted to know was there a button where he activated the fire? And I was like, no, that's just me knowing Brennan for so many years and making the show. Like I could tell because there's this whole checks and balances that have to happen before you do flames on stage, right? There's a whole team of pyro people who are making sure like a security guard hasn't wandered into the danger zone, right? So like there's just eyes everywhere. So they need to, so the whole time building up, I'm like, okay, I think he's going to do it. Okay, here we go. I tell people like, it's at Madison Square Garden doing a live show for 20,000 people when you find out if you are cut out for stress. There's nothing more stressful than that. It is an unbelievable amount of pressure. And either you love it and you want more or it's not for you. Happy to say that I'm directing the Hollywood Bowl show and I'm excited to take on the helm of it. I love the pressure. I don't know. I like putting on a good show, Elijah. I feel like, especially with this fan base, I feel like we made the show out of nothing. So every fan of the show, I feel like is like my kid. You know what I mean? Like somebody that I went out and helped find. So I didn't see a sea of 20,000 people when I went out onto the floor before the show. I saw a sea of like 20,000 friends or like-minded, like everybody was home. So the pressure to entertain them wasn't necessarily there. It was like the pressure to do a good job and hit our timing and make the show feel tight so that, because like people spent so much money to go to that show. And so the obligation was, I need to put on a good show for them so that they don't even like think about the money that they spent to get there. What a devastating outcome for somebody to be sitting in a chair at Madison Square Garden and be going, I spent all that money for this? Or do we over-deliver so big and so hard that they're just like, when's the next one? I'm going to go to that, right? Like that's putting on a good show. So both take time and quality, but like when you're doing a live show, you get one shot at it.
Dropout is sort of ramping up sort of the scale of their productions now. How is that going to like impact your work and how bold you and your team are going to like try to be with your productions going in the future?
Dimension 20 holds a special place in the heart of Dropout. We're always pressing the limits of the way we can tell the story in the Dome. We're always looking for ways of expanding and evolving storytelling, obviously. Abria Iyengar helped us transition into productions, and Rick Perry is constantly pressing us into new technologies and new ways to tell the stories. Spoiler alert for Dungeons and Drag Queens, but we had like a real animatronic piece in one of the battle boards, and we've never done that. So that was a lot of fun. So I think that like our mission doesn't really change, and we still have the same guardrails that we've always had. So it's not like, you know, they're coming to us and saying, you carte blanche now, do whatever you want. Like every production, no matter how big the production is, every Star Wars movie, every Marvel film has guardrails. They have a budget that they have to work within, and so we do as well. I think that nothing's really changing in regards to how we view the show, and that it's just a playground of creativity, and we're always looking for ways to expand and evolve in the way that we tell the story. It's exciting to watch Dropout thrive and to have been a part of that. Obviously, I've been there since '08, so it's really been fun to watch the different evolutions of College Humor into Dropout and seeing Dropout sort of hit this niche market right now and be a part of reinventing the television production world and help push out toxicity and the status quo. It was really, really fun. But yeah, nothing really changes for Dimension 20. We're going to just keep pushing the envelope on the way that we tell the stories and the types of stories that we tell.
That's all for this week's episode of Director's Digest. Michael, thank you for coming on the show. I'm your host, Elijah Lotzenheiser. Thanks for listening, and that's a wrap.